Once upon a time, in one of the wealthiest African cities, there lived a woman named Madame Grace. She was the wife of a powerful businessman, Mr. Richard, a man whose name carried weight in every corner of the city. Together, they had built an empire, an inheritance that many envied. But behind all the wealth, Madame Grace carried only one treasure in her heart, her only son, Daniel. Daniel was the child she had prayed for, the boy she had raised with love, discipline, and every resource available to her. He was their pride, their only heir. And so, every decision about his future mattered deeply. As the years passed, Daniel grew into a refined young man. He had traveled abroad, received the finest education, and prepared himself to step into his father's shoes. Now he was finally coming home, ready to take over the company and lead the family empire into the future. But even with all the pride she felt, Madame Grace could not find peace. There was one problem that weighed heavily on her heart. Who would her son marry? She had seen too many young women, beautiful faces hiding greedy hearts. Women who loved luxury but not loyalty. Women who desired riches but not the man himself. Madame Grace feared that Daniel, with all his wealth and status, would be surrounded by women who saw him only as a prize to be won. She needed to know the truth for herself. She needed to discover which woman carried a pure heart. So she made a daring decision. Madame Grace would disguise herself. She would leave behind her elegant gowns and her jewels. She would step into her own company, not as the owner's wife, but as a poor, ordinary cleaner. No one would know who she was. Not the managers, not the staff. And through this disguise, she would see clearly the true character of the women around her. Early one morning, before most of the staff arrived, Madame Grace walked through the company gates in a faded blouse and a worn-out wrapper. Her hair was tied with an old scarf, and in her hand, she carried a mop and a small bucket. The security man at the gate barely looked at her twice. To him, she was just another hired hand, one of the many cleaners who passed through the company every day. That was exactly what she wanted. When she stepped into the building, the stares began. Some of the younger women in the office looked her up and down with smirks on their faces. Her wrapper was old, her slippers flat and dusty, her blouse almost colorless from age. To them, she was nothing more than an unimportant woman whose presence did not matter. From that very first day, the mockery began. Whenever she bent to mop the floor, someone would deliberately stretch out a leg, forcing her to clean around them. When she carried files across the hall, one or two would laugh loudly, whispering words they thought she couldn't hear. Among them, the loudest was Vanessa, a young woman who was always dressed in the latest fashion. Her makeup was heavy, her perfume filled the room before she even entered. She was quick to insult, quick to mock, and she treated the cleaner as if she were invisible. But there was one young woman who stood apart, Anna. Anna was the receptionist. Unlike the others, she carried herself with quiet dignity. No heavy makeup, no expensive jewelry, no effort to show off. She greeted the cleaner with respect, called her Ma, and sometimes even helped her carry things. One afternoon, when Madame Grace accidentally spilled a bucket of water near the reception desk, laughter filled the room. Vanessa and her friends sneered, making snide remarks. But Anna quickly rose from her chair, helped steady her, and whispered, "Don't worry, Ma. Accidents happen. I'll help you clean this up." That day, Madame Grace's eyes lingered on Anna longer than usual. The test had only just begun, but already, she was beginning to see the difference. Every afternoon when the office workers left for lunch, Madame Grace would quietly sit in a corner of the staff cafeteria with her small food flask. Unlike the others who ordered fancy takeout or brought in rich meals, she always opened her container of simple home-cooked food. Some days it was beans cooked with palm oil. Other days, yam porridge or plain rice with a little stew. Nothing extravagant, but the aroma always filled the air, soft, warm, and comforting, like food made with care. But instead of admiration, she was met with insults. Vanessa would wrinkle her nose and say loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Ugh, that smell again. Who still eats beans like this in 2025? No wonder some people remain cleaners forever. Her friends would burst into laughter, pretending to fan the air as though the food was unbearable. Anna, sitting quietly at the corner desk, always looked uncomfortable when this happened. She would glance at Madame Grace, offer a small smile, and return to her work. One particular afternoon, Madame Grace decided to push her little test further. She carried her food into the cafeteria, and as she passed Anna's table, she pretended to trip slightly, spilling a bit of the stew onto the floor near the receptionist's feet. For a moment, silence fell. All eyes turned to Anna. Would she snap? Would she shout at the careless cleaner? Vanessa folded her arms, smirking, waiting for drama. But Anna simply stood up, grabbed some tissues from her desk, and knelt down to help clean the floor. "It's okay, Ma," she said softly. "Don't worry, accidents happen. Please, sit and eat. I'll take care of this." Madame Grace's eyes lingered on her, and in that moment, she knew the girl's kindness wasn't a performance. But Vanessa wouldn't let the moment pass. "Anna," she scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Why are you helping her? She's just a cleaner. Let her clean her mess. That's her job." Anna paused, looked at Vanessa, and replied calmly, "Respect doesn't cost anything. Everyone deserves it." The cafeteria fell silent. Vanessa scoffed again but had no real comeback. That evening, when the office was almost empty, Madame Grace deliberately left a small stack of papers untidy on the receptionist's desk, pretending it was by mistake. She wanted to see if Anna would get irritated after a long day. Anna noticed the papers, sighed softly, but instead of complaining, she arranged them neatly, shaking her head with a little smile. "This woman is clumsy, but she tries her best," she murmured to herself, and from her hidden corner, Madame Grace's heart softened even more. The tests were working. Day by day, Anna was revealing who she truly was: kind, patient, and respectful even when no one was watching. Over the next few weeks, the routine became clearer. Every morning, Madame Grace came into the office in her faded wrapper and rubber slippers, carrying her mop and bucket. She moved slowly, sighing heavily, as if each step was an effort. Sometimes, she deliberately bent over too long, groaning a little as if her back hurt. Other times, she would drop the mop handle by accident, or struggle to carry the water bucket up the stairs. Most of the staff ignored her. Some even laughed, but not Anna. Whenever Anna noticed her struggling, she would quietly stand up from her desk. If she wasn't attending to clients, she would walk over and say softly, "Ma, let me help you with that." Then she would take the bucket, carry it upstairs, or help wring out the mop. The first time it happened, Vanessa burst into laughter. "Anna, are you serious? Helping a cleaner with mop work? What's wrong with you? Don't you have your own job to do?" Her friends joined in, sneering. "Look at her, secretary turned cleaner's assistant. Maybe next week she'll start scrubbing toilets too." Anna ignored them. She simply carried the bucket as if she hadn't heard the mockery. But Madame Grace noticed everything. At times, Anna would walk into the corridor and find her resting on the stairs, holding her lower back and breathing hard. Without hesitation, Anna would kneel beside her, rub her shoulder gently, and say, "Please, Ma, don't overwork yourself. I'll finish this section for you." And she would mop the floor, one strip at a time, while Madame Grace sat watching. From her seat, Vanessa would shake her head in disgust. "Anna, you're embarrassing yourself. Do you know people are watching? Is this how you'll find a rich husband? By working like a maid?" But Anna only smiled faintly. "Helping someone doesn't reduce me," she replied. "It only shows I have hands to help." Her words made the other workers laugh at her again, but it made Madame Grace's heart swell. Each day, Madame Grace kept playing her part, sometimes pretending to stumble with files, sometimes coughing as though she couldn't continue. And each day, Anna's response was the same: patience, kindness, and quiet support. One evening, as the office was closing, Anna noticed Madame Grace still cleaning the far end of the corridor. Most of the staff had gone home. Instead of leaving, Anna stayed behind. She tied her scarf tighter and joined her, scrubbing the corners of the floor. "Why are you still here, Anna?" Madame Grace asked, feigning surprise. Anna smiled, brushing hair from her face. "Because no one deserves to be left alone in hard work. If I can make it lighter, I should." Madame Grace's eyes softened, but she quickly looked away, hiding her true feelings. She had to remain in character, the old, weak cleaner who was always a burden. Yet deep inside, her respect for Anna was growing stronger each day. The news spread like wildfire. Daniel was back. After years of studying abroad, first in London, then completing his master's in New York, the only son of Mr. and Mrs. Johnson was finally returning home. Stories about him had circulated for years, that he was brilliant, well-mannered, and more handsome than ever. By the time the black SUV pulled up to the company gates, whispers had already filled every corner of the building. Secretaries adjusted their skirts. Receptionists powdered their faces. Even Vanessa and her friends spent almost an hour fixing their makeup, practicing fake laughs and poses in front of the mirror. When Daniel walked through the lobby doors, the atmosphere shifted. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and walked with quiet confidence. His suit was perfectly tailored, his shoes polished until they reflected light. His presence alone commanded respect. Heads turned. Hearts skipped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Vanessa's eyes widened, and her lips curved into a sly smile. She nudged her friend. "That's him. He's even finer than I imagined. Just wait. I'll be Mrs. Daniel Johnson soon." The other girls giggled, already planning ways to accidentally cross his path. But Anna remained at her desk, typing steadily, as though nothing unusual had happened. She didn't even raise her head when he passed by. That, in itself, caught Daniel's attention. He glanced once at the young woman who seemed oblivious to his presence, then turned his gaze away, but the image stayed in his mind. As Daniel moved deeper into the office, he noticed something that made him stop. At the far end of the corridor, an old woman was bent over, scrubbing the floor. Her wrapper looked worn, her slippers thin. She was wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, and yet, she looked strangely familiar. Something tugged at him, but he couldn't place it. Before he could think further, Vanessa's loud voice broke the moment. "Look at this useless old cleaner," she said, smirking with her friends. "Always crawling on the floor like a lizard. She makes the whole office smell like poverty." Laughter echoed. Daniel froze. His jaw tightened. The old woman's hands shook slightly as she picked up her rag. Still, she didn't reply. But then, another voice rose. "Calm. Gentle. Steady." It was Anna. "Please, don't talk to her that way. She works hard, and she's a good woman. She doesn't deserve your insults." Vanessa whipped her head around, eyes narrowing. "Excuse me? Did you just defend her? You're unbelievable, Anna. Always acting like Mother Teresa. Do you even know who you're speaking for? She's just a cleaner." Anna didn't flinch. "She may be a cleaner, but she's still a human being. And she deserves respect." The words settled like fire in Daniel's chest. He turned sharply to Vanessa, his voice cutting like a blade. "Enough." The entire corridor fell silent. Daniel's eyes locked on Vanessa. "How dare you speak like that? A person's worth isn't measured by the clothes they wear or the job they do. If this is how you treat people, then perhaps you don't belong here." Vanessa's mouth fell open. She tried to stammer a reply, but the weight of his words left her frozen. Anna bent slightly, helping Madame Grace gather her rag and bucket. Daniel's gaze lingered on the scene, the young woman, quiet yet firm, standing against mockery, the old cleaner, humbled but not broken. Something stirred inside him. Later that afternoon, when the office had calmed, Daniel sat at his desk but found himself unable to concentrate. The image of Anna defending the cleaner kept replaying in his mind. Unlike the others, she hadn't tried to impress him. She hadn't even looked in his direction. Instead, she had stood up for someone everyone else despised. He picked up the phone. "Send Anna to my office," he instructed. Minutes later, a soft knock sounded at his door. Anna stepped in, her eyes calm but curious. She didn't seem nervous, just respectful. Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying her for a long moment. "Have a seat," he said at last. As she sat, he folded his hands on the desk. "I want to ask you something. That woman, the cleaner. Why do you defend her?" Anna's answer came without hesitation. "Because kindness costs nothing. And because the way we treat people who have less power than us says more about us than it does about them." Her words struck him deeply. He realized then that this woman was unlike the others. And from that moment, Daniel's interest in Anna began to grow. The office was unusually quiet that afternoon. Most of the staff were at their desks, while Madame Grace sat in the break room, eating her small bowl of beans and yam porridge. The sweet aroma filled the air, but it only attracted snide comments from Vanessa. "Smells like poverty in here," she said with a laugh, waving her perfume bottle dramatically. Her friends joined in, mocking the cleaner as they always did. Anna, unfazed, walked in with some files. She smiled warmly at Madame Grace. "Mama, how's the food today?" Madame Grace chuckled softly. "Sweet, my daughter. Just enough salt and pepper." Anna laughed, adjusted the tray on the table, and walked out. But minutes later, screams rang out. Madame Grace had collapsed on the floor, her bowl overturned, the food spilled across the tiles. Her body shook violently, and she gasped for air. Panic swept through the office. Staff shouted for help. Some ran in circles, while others simply stood frozen. Vanessa was the first to point. "It's Anna," she cried. "She was the last one with her food. I saw her near the bowl before this happened." The word spread like wildfire. Eyes turned sharply toward Anna. Shocked, she stammered, "What? No, I didn't touch her food." But Vanessa pressed harder. "You were in here. You even touched the table. Who else could it be?" Within minutes, the managers called security. The police were contacted. Anna's protests fell on deaf ears as whispers filled the air. "I can't believe it. She looked so decent, but maybe she wanted to get rid of the cleaner." Even Daniel, who rushed in after hearing the chaos, froze at the sight. His mother was being rushed to the hospital. His mind swirled with confusion. And then he heard the accusations. He turned toward Anna, his eyes full of disbelief. "Anna, is this true?" Her heart broke at his words. "Sir, you know me. I would never." But before she could finish, 2 officers gripped her arms and led her away. The sight of her being taken into custody burned in Daniel's mind, yet doubt clouded his judgment. That night, Madame Grace woke up in the hospital. Weak but conscious, she asked immediately, "Where is Anna?" When she was told Anna had been arrested, her eyes hardened. "No. Release her at once. That girl is innocent." Her voice carried such certainty that no one dared argue. She personally signed for Anna's bail, and the young woman walked out of the station, shaken but free. Back at the office, Daniel couldn't shake the guilt gnawing at him. He ordered a full investigation. They combed through every inch of the building, demanding to see the security footage. But when the IT team pulled up the files, shock rippled through the room. Every recording of the break room from that day was gone. Erased. Daniel's heart dropped. His fists clenched. Someone did this deliberately. In that moment, he knew he had made a terrible mistake. He had doubted the one person who had shown nothing but kindness. And now, the evidence of the real culprit was gone. As Daniel stared at the blank screen, one thought seared into his mind. Anna was innocent, and someone wanted her destroyed. And so, Anna walked free, but the shadow of suspicion still clung to her name. Daniel had already realized he was wrong, but by then it was too late. Because the real enemy was still out there. Hiding. Watching. Waiting. Everyone thinks they know who poisoned Madame Grace, but the truth? It isn't who you think. When the mask finally falls, hearts will be broken, loyalties will shatter, and someone will pay the ultimate price. Subscribe to Echoes of Ancient and turn on notifications. Because in part 2, the story takes a darker turn, and nothing will ever be the same again.